So there I was, Jake Morrison, former veterinarian turned xenobiologist, standing on an alien planet that looked like someone had taken Earth's Amazon rainforest and fed it nothing but steroids and bad decisions for about 1,000,000 years. The trees were purple, the grass was silver, and somewhere in the distance, something was making a sound like a broken air conditioner having an existential crisis. "Remember, Dr. Morrison," Captain Miranda Torres said over the comm, her voice carrying that special tone she reserved for when she thought I was about to do something spectacularly stupid. "This is a diplomatic mission. Try not to pet anything that could eat a small space station." I adjusted my field kit and grinned at the scanner readings. "Come on, Captain. When have I ever caused an interspecies incident? Do you want the chronological list or the alphabetical one?" Fair point. But hey, that thing with the Rigelian blobcats was a misunderstanding, and technically the Great Mollusk Liberation of Kepler 442b worked out fine in the end. Mostly. The diplomatic team was about 50 meters ahead of me, and from the sound of their heated whispers, things weren't going well. Ambassador Chen was frantically flipping through his cultural protocol handbook, probably looking for the chapter titled, "What to Do When the Aliens Think You're Here to Steal Their Lunch Money." The Cathari delegation stood in a perfect semicircle, all 7 feet of purple-scaled, 4-armed, apparently very annoyed alien diplomat. That's when I heard it. A low, rumbling growl coming from the tree line that made my scanner practically have a nervous breakdown. The readings were off the charts, biological mass indicators were screaming, and my threat assessment system had apparently given up and was just flashing, "Nope!" in bright red letters. "Oh, that's not good," muttered Ambassador Chen. The Cathari started backing away, making chittering sounds that my translator helpfully informed me meant, "Death approaches, and why did we invite these hairless idiots? Always nice to know where you stand." Then it emerged from the forest, and I had to admit, it was impressive. Picture a cross between a saber-toothed tiger, a grizzly bear, and something that definitely skipped anger management classes. Black fur that seemed to absorb light, muscles that had muscles, and teeth that could probably double as industrial cutting tools. My scanner was now just making a continuous whimpering sound. "Shadow Maw," whispered one of the Cathari in what sounded like reverential terror. "None survive close contact. None." The diplomatic team was slowly backing toward the shuttle, which seemed like a reasonable response to a creature that looked like it bench-pressed freight haulers for fun. But here's the thing about being a veterinarian for 15 years before I got into the xenobiology game. You develop a different perspective on dangerous animals. While everyone else was seeing a nightmare predator, I was seeing behavioral patterns. The way it held its head, the slight favoring of its left rear leg, the way its breathing seemed labored. This wasn't a killing machine stalking prey. This was a worried parent. "Hey there, big guy," I said, taking a step forward. "Morrison, get back here!" Captain Torres's voice crackled through the comm with enough force to probably register on seismic equipment. But the Shadow Maw had stopped growling. It was looking at me with eyes that were definitely intelligent, definitely tired, and definitely asking for help in a way that transcended species barriers. I pulled out my medical scanner, the one I'd modified for xenobiological work, and took another step forward. The creature didn't move, just watched me with what I was increasingly certain was hope. "Yeah," I said, reading the biosins. "I thought so. You're not here to eat us, are you? You're here because someone in your family is sick." The Shadow Maw, which I had already mentally nicknamed Fluffy, because apparently my survival instincts had been replaced by an irresistible urge to be sarcastic in the face of mortal danger, did something that made the entire Cathari delegation gasp in unison. It sat down, not the aggressive crouch of a predator about to pounce, just sat down like a very large, very worried dog, waiting for the vet to call its name. "Morrison." Captain Torres's voice had reached that pitch that usually preceded her threatening to space me. "What are you doing?" "Practicing medicine," I replied, approaching Fluffy with my scanner active. Just like I did for 15 years before I started poking around alien ecosystems for a living. The bioredeems were fascinating. Elevated stress hormones, irregular heartbeat, and signs of severe sleep deprivation. Classic symptoms of a parent dealing with sick offspring. I'd seen it 1,000 times in everything from golden retrievers to Martian sandcats. "Your cubs are sick, aren't they?" I asked Fluffy conversationally. "And you came here looking for help because you're desperate." Fluffy made a sound that was part whine, part rumble, and entirely heartbreaking. Then it did something that made Ambassador Chen drop his protocol handbook and several Cathari make sounds like deflating balloons. It gently took my sleeve in its massive jaws and started pulling me toward the forest. "Oh, for the love of—" Captain Torres muttered. "Morrison, I am not explaining to command how I lost my xenobiologist to a creature whose species designation literally translates to shadow of death." "Actually," I called back, allowing myself to be led by what was essentially a 1,500-pound therapy case, The Cathari word shadow maw translates more accurately to one who hunts in darkness to protect family. Your translators need updating. The walk through the purple forest was surprisingly pleasant, once you got past the part where you were being escorted by something that could probably bite through starship hull plating. Fluffy moved carefully, constantly checking to make sure I was keeping up, occasionally making soft rumbling sounds that I was pretty sure meant thanks for not screaming and running away like literally everyone else in the galaxy. We arrived at what could only be described as a den, carved into the base of a massive tree that was definitely older than human civilization. Inside, I found exactly what I expected. 3 cubs, each about the size of a small pony, lying listlessly on what appeared to be carefully arranged bedding. Okay, let's see what we're dealing with, I muttered, pulling out my medical kit. The cubs were burning up with fever, dehydrated and showing signs of severe respiratory distress. My scanner identified the culprit quickly enough. A bacterial infection that was apparently common on this world, but usually only affected much smaller creatures. The cubs' immune systems were overwhelmed, trying to fight something their bodies weren't designed to handle. Good news, Fluffy, I said, loading up a broad-spectrum antibiotic that should work across most carbon-based life forms. This is totally treatable. Bad news is, I'm about to stick needles in your babies, and I really hope you understand I'm trying to help. Fluffy watched intently as I administered the injections, making soft, encouraging sounds to the cubs. When I pulled out IV bags to address the dehydration, the big predator carefully helped hold the line steady. Morrison, what's your status? Captain Torres's voice crackled through the comm. Oh, just practicing veterinary medicine on the galaxy's most feared predator species while their parent assists with the procedure, I replied, checking the cubs' vitals as the antibiotics began to work. Tuesday stuff. The response from the comm was a sound I'd never heard Captain Torres make before. It was somewhere between a laugh, a sob, and the noise someone makes when they realize their paperwork just got infinitely more complicated. 20 minutes later, the cubs were already looking better. Their breathing had improved, the fever was breaking, and they were starting to show interest in the food Fluffy had apparently been saving for when they felt well enough to eat. As I packed up my medical kit, Fluffy did something that I'm pretty sure redefined interspecies relations for the next 1,000 years. The massive predator very gently nuzzled my shoulder, then lay down and rolled over to expose its belly in the universal animal gesture of complete trust and submission. Well, I said, giving Fluffy a cautious belly rub that made the creature purr like a starship engine. I guess we're friends now. Now, here's the thing about the galaxy's communication networks. They're faster than gossip at a space station cantina, and about twice as reliable as a politician's campaign promises. Which is to say, by the time I walked back to the diplomatic meeting with a 1,500-pound apex predator trotting beside me like an oversized puppy, half the known galaxy had already heard about the human pet phenomenon. Ambassador Chen took one look at me casually scratching behind Fluffy's ears and promptly sat down on the nearest rock, staring into the middle distance like someone who'd just watched the fundamental laws of physics file for divorce. Ambassador Zektul, I said cheerfully to the lead Cathari diplomat, who was making the same expression my nephew made when I told him Santa wasn't real. Meet Fluffy. Fluffy, this is Ambassador Zektul. Try not to drool on him. Fluffy, being the perfect gentleman, sat politely and offered Zektul a paw the size of a dinner plate. This is impossible, Zektul whispered, his forearms trembling as he very carefully shook the offered paw. The Shadow Maw are the apex predators of our world. They fear nothing, they trust no one. They have never, in 10,000 years of recorded history, allowed another species within striking distance without violence. Well, I said, as Fluffy decided this seemed like a good time for another belly rub, there's a first time for everything. The galactic communication channels were absolutely losing their collective minds. Within hours, my little impromptu veterinary house call had become the most shared, analyzed, and debated news story since humanity first figured out how to build spaceships that didn't explode on Tuesdays. The Regellian Science Council issued a statement, declaring the footage clearly fabricated by human propaganda artists. The Centauri Trade Federation immediately began drafting legislation to regulate human-predator interaction licensing. And the Andromedan Philosophy Guild started a 3-day debate about whether this proved humans were either the galaxy's greatest monster tamers or its most elaborate practical jokers. My personal favorite response came from the Betelgeuse Tourism Board, who immediately began advertising, "Come to Betelgeuse, our predators are only mostly lethal." Captain Torres found me in the ship's mess hall about 6 hours later, staring at a datapad showing galactic news feeds while trying to eat something that claimed to be meatloaf but had clearly given up on life somewhere around the reheating process. "So," she said, sitting down across from me with her own tray of culinary sadness, "how does it feel to be the most famous human in the galaxy?" "Surreal," I admitted, scrolling through headlines like, Human befriends certain death, scientist baffled, and local veterinarian accidentally revolutionizes interspecies relations, more at 11. I mean, all I did was treat some sick animals. It's not like I invented faster-than-light travel or cured the common cold. Jake, Torres said, pointing to her datapad. The Galactic Council has called an emergency session. The Cathari have formally requested you as a permanent xenobiological consultant. And 3 different species have asked if you can come look at their problem predators. Because apparently the galaxy just collectively decided you're some kind of animal whisper wizard. I looked at the feeds again. The video of me giving fluffy belly rubs had been viewed approximately 8 billion times. The Galactic Council's resident skeptic, Counselor Vrix of the Pessimistic Dominion, had issued a statement calling it impossible human trickery, designed to make the galaxy believe in fairy tales and friendship. You know what the funny part is? I said, taking another bite of theoretical meatloaf. Back on Earth, this wouldn't even make the local news. Dog trainer helps sick puppies, story it never because it happens every day. Torres laughed. The kind of laugh that suggested she was either having a great time or a complete nervous breakdown. Jake, you just proved that humanity can bond with creatures that have spent millennia being the galaxy's bogeymen. Species that other civilizations built entire mythologies around avoiding. And you did it by basically playing veterinarian house call. Ambassador Zektul chose that moment to enter the mess hall, moving with the careful dignity of someone who had spent the day having his worldview completely renovated without his permission. Dr. Morrison, he said formally, all 4 arms clasped behind his back. I have been in communication with the Cathari High Council. They have authorized me to make an unprecedented request. Let me guess, I said. You want me to look at more sick animals. Our entire understanding of the Shadowmaw was wrong, Zektul admitted, his scaled features showing what I was pretty sure was embarrassment. For generations, we believed they were mindless killing machines. We never considered that their aggression might be defensive behavior, or that they might be suffering from diseases we could treat. We never tried to help them because we assumed they could not be helped. He paused, looking directly at me with those large golden eyes. You have shown us that what we called impossible was simply untried. And now, thanks to galactic communications, 17 different species have reported similar results. Predators that were once considered untouchable death machines are apparently just misunderstood animals in need of proper veterinary care. I blinked. 17 species? Torres held up her datapad. 18, actually. The Drakthar Empire just sent a message. They want to know if you can take a look at their Void Stalkers. Their what now? The Drakthar Empire, for those keeping score at home, was basically what happened when you took every militaristic civilization trope, fed it protein powder and aggression steroids, then gave it really good publicists. They were 8 feet tall, built like walking tanks, and had a cultural philosophy that could be summarized as, if it moves, conquer it, and if it doesn't move, conquer it anyway just to be sure. Their homeworld looked like someone had designed a planet specifically for heavy metal album covers. Black volcanic rock, red skies, and an atmosphere that could charitably be described as aggressively hostile to anything resembling joy. The perfect place to raise the galaxy's most feared predators. General Teneok met us at the spaceport, and I had to admit, he was impressive. Imagine a cross between a rhinoceros, a professional wrestler, and something that definitely won every argument it ever had. His armor looked like it had been forged from recycled starship hulls, and he carried weapons that seemed designed to solve problems through the advanced technique of making them no longer exist. So, he rumbled in a voice like grinding starship engines, you are the human who claims to tame the untamable. I'm the human who gives medical checkups to sick animals, I corrected, adjusting my field kit. There's a difference. Thyniok made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could punch through starship armor. We shall see. The Void Stalker has killed 7 of our finest warriors. It has destroyed 3 containment facilities. Our scientists declare it irredeemably hostile. Our priests say it is cursed by the war gods themselves. I said, checking my scanner. And when was the last time anyone tried treating it for chronic pain? The silence that followed was so complete I could hear Captain Torres muttering prayers to various deities through the comlink. Chronic pain? Vaynuk repeated, as if I'd just suggested the solution to galactic warfare was group hugs. General, I said patiently. In my experience, when an animal is constantly aggressive, constantly destroying things, and constantly trying to hurt anyone who comes near it, 9 times out of 10 it's because something is hurting and it doesn't know how to ask for help. We walked through what could only be described as a military installation designed by someone who thought regular military installations weren't nearly intimidating enough. Everything was black metal, red lights, and ominous warning signs that basically said, "Abandon hope all ye who enter here, also, bring medical insurance." The Void Stalker's containment facility was a masterpiece of over-engineering. Force fields, plasma barriers, automated defense systems, and enough firepower to level a small city. All to contain one very large, very angry creature that was currently throwing itself against the barriers, with the kind of desperate fury that made my veterinarian instincts start ringing alarm bells. "There," Thaynok said with obvious pride, "the most dangerous predator in known space. Behold the Void Stalker." I beheld it, and immediately wanted to smack every Drakthar scientist who had ever looked at this creature. The Void Stalker was magnificent, I'll give it that. About the size of an earth elephant, covered in what looked like living shadow, with eyes like burning stars and claws that could probably cut through reality itself. It moved like liquid darkness, and when it roared, the sound made my bones vibrate. It was also limping. "Oh, for crying out loud," I muttered, watching the creature favor its right foreleg. "How long's it been moving like that?" "Moving like what?" Thaynok asked. "Like it's in constant pain, you walking tank museum. Look at how it holds that leg. See how it keeps shifting its weight? That's not aggression, that's chronic joint pain. Probably arthritis, possibly an old injury that never healed properly." I turned to face the general, who was staring at me like I'd just claimed his precious war beast was actually a misunderstood flower child. "General, with respect, you haven't been containing the galaxy's most dangerous predator. You've been torturing a sick animal in a cage too small for it to move properly, with no environmental enrichment, no social contact, and no medical care. Of course it wants to destroy everything. I'd want to destroy everything too." The silence stretched on for approximately 17 years, during which I'm pretty sure Captain Torres aged visibly through the comlink. "You wish to enter the containment area," Thaynok said finally. "I wish to give your ultimate predator a basic medical examination and probably some anti-inflammatory medication," I replied. "Maybe a joint supplement if my scanner readings are correct." "And if you are wrong? If the creature simply devours you?" I shrugged. "Then you can say you told me so and I'll be too dead to argue. But General, I've been doing this for 20 years across dozens of species. That animal isn't trying to kill people because it's evil. It's trying to kill people because it hurts, and it's scared, and it doesn't understand why no one will help it." General Thanik studied me for a long moment, then did something that probably violated 17 different Drakthar military protocols. He started laughing, not the polite chuckle of diplomatic amusement, the deep, booming laughter of someone who had just realized the universe's biggest joke was being played on him. "Human," he said, wiping what might have been tears from his eyes. "Either you are the bravest creature in the galaxy, or the most foolish. Perhaps both. Very well. The containment field will be lowered. But I warn you, when the Void Stalker kills you, I will not feel responsible." "Fair enough," I said, pulling out my medical scanner and walking toward the containment area. "But when I cure your unstoppable killing machine with basic veterinary care, you're buying the first round." As the containment fields powered down, the Void Stalker stopped its pacing and turned to look at me. Up close it was even more magnificent, and obviously miserable. Those burning star eyes held intelligence, pain, and what I was increasingly certain was a desperate plea for someone, anyone, to understand what was wrong. "Hey there, princess," I said softly, because apparently my naming conventions hadn't improved with exposure to galaxy-ending predators. "Let's see what's been hurting you." The creature that had killed 7 Drakthar warriors and destroyed 3 containment facilities took one look at me, made a sound like cosmic wind chimes, and very carefully lay down to expose the injured leg. Behind me, I heard General Thaynok make a sound like a starship engine having an existential crisis. "Yeah," I said, running my scanner over Princess's joints and finding exactly what I expected to find. "I thought so. Severe arthritis, probably exacerbated by the stress of captivity and lack of proper exercise. Poor thing. You've been hurting for years, haven't you?" Princess made a soft trilling sound that my heart told me meant, "Yes, please help me, I'm so tired of everything hurting." I loaded up a syringe with a broad-spectrum anti-imager that should work on most silicon-based life forms, then paused. "This is going to sting a little, Princess, but it'll help with the pain. Try not to eat me until you feel better, okay?" The injection went smoothly. Princess flinched slightly, then looked at me with what I could only describe as surprised gratitude. Within minutes she was moving more easily, the desperate edge leaving her movements as the pain medication took effect. "There we go," I said, giving her what I hoped was a reassuring pat on what might have been a shoulder. Better? Princess responded by doing something that probably redefined Drakthar military doctrine. Haha, she purred, a sound like distant thunder mixed with contentment, echoing through the containment facility and making the force field generators harmonize in sympathy. Then she very gently nuzzled my shoulder and settled down for what appeared to be the first comfortable rest she'd had in years. Well, I called back to General Thainok, who was standing there like someone had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. I think we can safely say your ultimate killing machine just needed some ibuprofen and a friend. What happened next was something I like to call the great galactic oh shit moment. Though the official reports probably used more diplomatic language. General Thainok walked slowly into the containment area, moving like someone who had just discovered that everything he thought he knew about the universe had been wrong, and also possibly a practical joke. Princess, meanwhile, had decided that having a pain-free afternoon was the best thing that had happened to her in years, and was now rolling around like a house cat the size of a small starship. This is impossible, Thainok muttered, watching his ultimate weapon of mass destruction playfully batting at a piece of debris with all the terrifying menace of a kitten discovering a yarn ball. The Voidstalker is the apex predator of our homeworld. It has no natural enemies. It fears nothing. It trusts nothing. General, I said, scratching Princess behind what I hoped was an ear. With respect, your apex predator has been living in chronic pain for probably years. Imagine if you had to live with constant joint pain in a space too small to move properly, with no social contact and no understanding of why you were suffering. You'd probably want to destroy everything too. Princess made a sound like cosmic purring and rolled over to present her belly for rubs. I obliged, because apparently my life choices had led me to a point where giving belly rubs to galaxy-destroying predators seemed like reasonable career development. But how did our scientists miss this? Thainok asked, his voice carrying the kind of bewilderment usually reserved for people who had just discovered their entire educational system was apparently run by particularly dedicated comedians. Because they were looking at her like a weapon instead of like a patient, I explained, running my scanner over Princess's joints and finding inflammation levels that would have had any Earth veterinarian reaching for the strongest painkillers available. Your people studied the Voidstalker's combat capabilities, predator behaviors, and destructive potential. Did anyone ever just ask, hey, why is this animal so angry all the time? The silence that followed suggested that no, nobody had ever asked that question. Dr. Morrison, came Captain Torres's voice over the comm, sounding like someone who had given up trying to understand the universe and decided to just roll with whatever happened next. I'm getting reports from across the galaxy. It seems your little demonstration has inspired some copycat veterinary missions. Oh, I said, continuing to administer what was probably the most expensive belly rub in galactic history. The Centauri Federation just reported that their unstoppable death beetles were actually suffering from a fungal infection. Treatment with basic antifungals has rendered them, and I quote, surprisingly cuddly. The Rigelian Science Council has discovered that their nightmare tentacle monsters were exhibiting aggressive behavior due to severe vitamin D deficiency. And the Andromedan Philosophy Guild wants to know if you can explain why their existentially terrifying void wraiths started being friendly after someone gave them proper lighting and social enrichment. I paused in my belly-rubbing activities. Wait, how many species are we talking about here? At last count, 43 different civilizations have reported similar results. Turns out the galaxy is full of ultimate predators that were just sick, injured, or living in terrible conditions. Princess chose that moment to demonstrate her newfound joy by playfully pouncing on a piece of containment equipment, reducing it to very expensive scrap metal while making sounds of pure delight. General Thainok watched this display with the expression of someone whose entire worldview was being renovated without his permission. Princess, I said sternly, we don't destroy property just because we feel better. That's poor impulse control. The cosmic death machine that had terrorized the Drakthar Empire for years looked appropriately chastened and settled down with a sound like apologetic thunder. She responds to verbal correction, Thainok said weakly. Of course she does. She's intelligent, social, and she's been trying to communicate her needs for years. Your people just interpreted everything she said as threats instead of requests for help. I ran another scan, checking Princess's overall health. The joint pain was responding well to the anti-inflammator, but there were other issues. Signs of chronic stress, poor nutrition, and what looked like symptoms of severe depression. General, when was the last time she had social contact with her own species? Social contact. Thainok repeated the phrase, like I'd suggested Princess needed to learn interpretive dance. She's a social creature. Look at her behavior patterns, her response to interaction, the way she's been desperately trying to get attention. She's not just physically sick, she's lonely. You've been keeping an intelligent social predator in solitary confinement for years. Princess made a sound that was definitely agreement, mixed with what I was pretty sure was an accusatory glare at General Thaneuk. But Voidstalkers are solitary hunters, Thaneuk protested. Our xenobiologists confirmed this through extensive observation. Did your xenobiologists observe them in their natural habitat, or in captivity? Another silence. Let me guess, I continued, pulling up Princess's medical history on my scanner. All your observations of solitary behavior came from studying creatures that had been captured and isolated. You never considered that the aggressive, solitary behavior might be a stress response to captivity, rather than natural behavior. Captain Torres's voice crackled through the comm again. Jake, I'm getting requests from the Galactic Council. They want to convene an emergency session on interspecies predator relations. Apparently your little medical intervention has sparked a galaxy-wide revolution in xenobiology. A revolution? I asked, as Princess decided my shoulder was the perfect place for a nap and settled her massive head there with a contented sigh. Jake, Torres said, and I could hear the mixture of pride and exasperation in her voice. In the last 6 hours, the galaxy's most feared predators have been revealed to be sick animals in need of medical care. Civilizations that have lived in terror of their local apex predators for millennia are discovering that a basic veterinary checkup can solve most of their monster problems. You've accidentally proven that the galaxy's approach to dangerous wildlife has been catastrophically wrong for thousands of years. I looked around the containment facility, now more accurately described as a very expensive medical examination room where a previously terrifying predator was taking a nap on my shoulder while purring like a cosmic engine. So what you're telling me, I said slowly, is that nobody in this entire galaxy thought to try treating scary animals like, well, animals instead of monsters? But appears to be the case, yes. Princess shifted in her sleep, making a small sound of contentment. General Thaneuk stood there, looking like someone had just informed him that his entire military career had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. You know what the really funny part is? I said, gently adjusting Princess's position so she'd be more comfortable. Back on Earth, this would be called Tuesday. Animal exhibits aggression, check for pain and medical issues, provide appropriate treatment and environmental enrichment. Problem solved. We've been doing this for centuries. And yet, Thaneuk said quietly, we, with all our advanced technology and scientific knowledge, never thought to simply ask if the creature was suffering. General, I said, as Princess continued her nap and my shoulder began to go numb under the weight of a sleeping cosmic predator. The most advanced technology in the galaxy can't replace the simple act of looking at an animal and asking, what do you need to be happy and healthy? That's not technology. That's just basic compassion. Through the comm, I could hear the sounds of what appeared to be the entire galaxy having a collective epiphany about the nature of predator-prey relationships, interspecies communication, and the radical concept that maybe, just maybe, scary animals were just animals that needed help. 6 months later, I found myself sitting in what used to be called the most dangerous office in the galaxy, but was now more accurately described as the place where Jake Morrison tries to pretend he knows what he's doing while running an interspecies animal welfare organization. The office was located on Nexus Station, the galaxy's diplomatic hub, in a section that had previously been reserved for emergency crisis management, which, considering my track record with interspecies incidents, was probably appropriate. My desk was currently occupied by a small creature that looked like a cross between a ferret and a nebula, which had been terrorizing the Zephyrian trade routes until someone realized it was just homesick and needed a proper habitat that mimicked its home planet's gravitational fields. It was now serving as my unofficial office mascot and occasional paperweight. Dr. Morrison, said my assistant, a cheerful Cathari named Veltar, who had volunteered for the job after Princess had personally recommended me to half the galaxy's diplomatic corps, you have 17 consultation requests, 43 species asking for environmental habitat assessments, and something called the Galactic Predator Rehabilitation Initiative wants to know if you can review their new protocols, and how many of these terrifying monsters turned out to be perfectly reasonable animals with treatable medical conditions, I asked, reviewing the morning reports. All of them, Veltar replied with what I'd learned to recognize as Cathari amusement. Though the Andromedan void wraiths required some creative interpretation. Apparently, existential terror translates more accurately to severe seasonal affective disorder. I looked out the viewport at the bustling station traffic. Ships from dozens of species came and went, many of them now carrying what used to be called diplomatic emergency response teams, but were actually just veterinarians with really good hazard pay. The galaxy had apparently decided that if humans could treat cosmic death machines like oversized house pets, maybe it was time to rethink their approach to wildlife management. Sir, Veltar continued. General Thanehoke is here for his weekly update. The general entered, looking significantly less intimidating than he had 6 months ago. This was partly because he'd traded his battle armor for more practical work clothes, and partly because he was carrying a small, stuffed toy that looked suspiciously like Princess. "Jake," he said, settling into a chair that creaked under his considerable weight, "the Voidstalker rehabilitation program has exceeded all expectations. Princess has successfully integrated with a family group of her own species, and we've identified 14 other solitary hunters who are actually just suffering from forced isolation." "And the military applications?" I asked, because the Drakthar Empire hadn't become a galactic power by ignoring practical considerations. Thanehoke's expression shifted to something that might have been embarrassment, if embarrassment could bench press a small spaceship. "It turns out that healthy, happy predators are significantly more effective than angry, pain-ridden ones. Who knew that animals perform better when they're not constantly suffering?" "Revolutionary concept," I said dryly. "The war applications are actually quite impressive," he continued, apparently missing my sarcasm entirely. "Princess and her family group have volunteered to assist with our planetary defense initiatives. Turns out that when you ask nicely instead of forcing compliance, cooperation improves dramatically." My communicator chimed with an incoming message from Captain Torres, who was currently somewhere in the Regalian sector helping establish the galaxy's first interspecies veterinary exchange program. "Jake," her voice crackled through the speaker, "you're not going to believe this. The Regalian blobcats have started a support group for formerly misunderstood predators. Apparently, they're sharing coping strategies for dealing with speciest stereotyping and inadequate environmental enrichment." "The blobcats are having therapy sessions?" I asked. "Group therapy sessions. Led by a reformed Centauri death beetle who's apparently pursuing a degree in interspecies psychology. Jake, I think we broke the galaxy." I looked around my office, taking in the sight of my Nebula Ferret mascot, the stack of consultation requests from species whose names I couldn't pronounce, and the growing pile of thank you messages from creatures that had previously been considered unstoppable forces of destruction. "Veltar," I said, "what's the current count on successfully rehabilitated ultimate predators?" "As of this morning, sir, we've logged successful interventions with creatures from 237 different species across 49 star systems. The average treatment success rate is 94%, with most cases requiring only basic medical care, proper nutrition, and appropriate social environments." "And the failures?" "The remaining 6% turned out to be actual aggressive predators with legitimate territorial disputes. They responded well to conflict mediation and boundary negotiation." I leaned back in my chair, which had been specially reinforced after Princess had decided to test its structural integrity during one of her visits. Through the viewport, I could see a transport ship marked with the new Interspecies Animal Welfare Organization logo, a stylized paw print surrounded by stars, and the motto, "Every creature deserves understanding." "You know what the really bizarre part of all this is?" I said to nobody in particular. "What's that, sir?" Veltar asked. "I became famous across the galaxy for doing exactly what I was trained to do 20 years ago on Earth. Look at an animal, figure out what's wrong, fix it if possible, and provide appropriate care. The only difference is that now the animals are the size of small buildings and can accidentally destroy space stations when they're having a bad day." My communicator chimed again, this time with a message from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zekthul's face appeared on the screen, looking significantly less stressed than he had during our first meeting. "Jake," he said, "I wanted to personally thank you for the paradigm shift you've created in interspecies relations. The Cathari High Council has officially redesignated all former apex predators as ecological partners, and we're seeing unprecedented cooperation between species that have been in conflict for millennia." "Just doing my job, Ambassador," I replied. "Your job," Zektul said with what I'd learned to recognize as Cathari humor, "appears to have accidentally revolutionized galactic civilization. The Council wants to know if you'd be interested in expanding your operations." "Expanding how?" "Well, we've received reports of some rather aggressive plant life in the Outer Rim that's been terrorizing mining operations. The botanical experts are completely baffled, but given your track record with impossible cases..." I looked at my Nebula Ferret, who looked back with what I chose to interpret as encouragement. Through the viewport, another ship was arriving, this one carrying a delegation from a species I'd never heard of, probably bringing news of another unstoppable monster that just needed someone to ask what was wrong. "Veltar," I said, "clear my schedule for next week. Apparently we're going into the aggressive plant business." "Shall I prepare the standard consultation package, sir? Medical scanner, broad-spectrum medications, and environmental assessment equipment? And maybe some plant food," I added. "You never know." As I watched the galaxy go about its business outside my viewport, I couldn't help but reflect on the fundamental truth that had accidentally changed everything. Sometimes the most advanced civilizations in the universe just needed someone to remind them that scary doesn't always mean dangerous. Aggressive doesn't always mean evil, and sometimes the most powerful predators in the galaxy just need someone to ask, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" It wasn't exactly how I'd planned to spend my career, but then again, most of the best jobs are the ones you never see coming. "Sir," Veltar said. "There's one more message. It's from Princess—" The screen lit up with an image of the former ultimate weapon of mass destruction, lounging contentedly in a natural habitat with her family group, looking about as threatening as a cosmic-sized house cat who'd just discovered the perfect sunny spot for an afternoon nap. "Tell her I said hello," I said, "and that I'm proud of how well she's doing." Because at the end of the day, that's really what it was all about. Helping creatures be the best versions of themselves, whether they happen to be 3-pound house cats or 3,000-pound galactic apex predators. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about assumptions, compassion, and the revolutionary power of simply asking, "What do you need to be happy?" And I'd learned that sometimes the best way to change the universe is to just keep doing what you've always done, one patient at a time.